This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. The Taiwanese company whose pages were detonated in Lebanon denies involvement in the act, saying the devices were manufactured elsewhere under a license. Now, Australia, the UK and the US say that their AUKUS defense partnership will eye Japanese cooperation when it comes to autonomous maritime systems. North Korea put its neighbours on edge for the second time in a week, launching a series of ballistic missiles, what Tokyo calls the test unacceptable. And some hope for Nippon Steel's takeover bid for US Steel. Washington is reportedly delaying its decision on the politically sensitive deal until after the November presidential elections. Also ahead on East Asia Tonight, Taiwan's soaring cost of living weighs heavily, especially on its young. See how they're managing their expenses and what retailers are doing to get consumers to spend. A Taiwanese electronics company says that it was not behind the pages used in yesterday's wave of explosions in Lebanon that threatens an escalation of conflict in the Middle East. Well, the attacks killed at least 9 people and injured thousands. Images of destroyed pages show stickers that are consistent with pages made by Taiwan-based Gogh Apollo. Well, the company has since clarified that the model of pages used widely by Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon was made by Budapest-based BAC Consulting. Gogh Apollo adds that it had only licensed out its branding to the company. CNA's Victoria Jen has more.
Founded in 1995, Gogh Apollo is a small Taiwanese manufacturer of wireless communication products with a capitalization of $3 million. According to information on its website, the company has 40 employees, and its products are mainly used by restaurants, fire departments, and care centers. Its owner, Xu Qingguang, has denied manufacturing the pagers that exploded en masse in Lebanon. He said they have been made by a European company named BAC through a licensing deal. They have had business dealings for 3 years, and they signed a contract about 2 years ago.
我有卖它的，就是用那个商标授权给他哦，所以这个产品不是阿波罗的该有的产品，是我授权给他们贴牌的一个产品哦，所以在这里跟大家做一个声明哦。
Xu doesn't rule out the possibility of filing a lawsuit overseas against BAC. Analysts in Taiwan have expressed doubts that the Taiwanese company would have been willingly participated in the attack. Taiwan's economic ministry has said that there is no record of direct exports of the device to Lebanon. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
Earlier, we spoke to Tony Loran, director at Zero Risk International, and he gave his insights on the potential threat that pages pose, given that the device is thought to be quite obsolete but are still in use.
Quite a serious threat, to be honest with you, because the pages are smaller, nimble, and quite easily kind of discreted. The mobile phones themselves have been used before in the past as well to have kind of remote detonation there. But the pages themselves offer a really good kind of portal with regards to a battery power strength. Simple thing is, a solution like this is like 3 grams of what was considered like an explosive anyway. It's not an explosive here, thank God, but it represents that particular kind of size that when put into the pager and with that particular small data board that they've actually built into there, it gives you the chance to actually carry multiple messages out at once, which we've actually seen. So it's a very, very good, easy, discrete method of actually being able to actually target somebody.
I appreciate that you deconstructed that pager for us. For many of us, it's been a long time since we've actually touched one. So how much planning do you think went into this sophisticated coordination involving this old-school device? Today started with different theories, and it seems now explosives were actually hand-planted in these devices.
Well, I've got a couple of theories on this, to be honest with you, Yasmin. I think that at the packaging stage, I think it would be kind of really difficult to do something there with, with a commercial company. That's one thing I find really kind of difficult to comprehend, because for each of these devices, there's an element of risk of being found out. I think it's more likely that what the Israelis have done, or if it is the Israelis, but it all starts to point towards that particular area, that they've done a switch, and in mass as well. So potentially what they could have done is built these devices and then switched the package from a commercial point of view. So they're already pre-prepped, and the actual small explosives are in there. It takes a special small motherboard to be in there, but at the end of the day, as we said anyway, it's commercial explosives. And as you can see from that particular image there that you're running, it only takes a small amount anyway to cause maximum devastation around the abdominal area, which is where some of the pages are kept. And also for some of the children that were involved at that height as well, when the pager does go off, unfortunately it's going to affect a lot of the kids that are moving around in markets and things like that, where everything's a kind of a tight environment.
And let's talk about the manufacturing side of things. Taiwan's Gogh Apollo says that it didn't make the pages that were used in these detonations, instead by a company in Europe that had the right to use their firm's brand. But the New York Times claims otherwise. How key is the manufacturer in this case, and could there be any accountability on them?
I think basically what's happened is that the remnants of the pager that's got that label and serial numbers and so on and so forth do point towards that, the company, the Gogh Apollo. But again, look, you've got to look at the sophistication of just exactly what went on as well. The Israelis have got very good history of being able to actually kind of infiltrate, switch, maneuver, and get their own particular devices or their own kit into an area. And coming back to your original question there, it was a long time in the planning. This thing just doesn't happen overnight. It's a question of building up your human intelligence, finding out just exactly where the weakest link was, looking at logisticians. Where are these pages made? What are they doing? Where's the supply chain? Where's the weakness in the supply chain as well? And that's really what some of the security forces have got to actually find out really fully whether this particular device goes all the way back to Apollo, or whether there was a switch, or whether there was something else that happened along the chain, along that particular process, really.
North Korea has carried out a test of its new 600mm multiple launch rocket system, a move detected by both Japan and South Korea. Now, this was the second time in a week that the country launched short-range ballistic missiles. Japan says the missiles landed outside of the country's territory, an exclusive economic zone. Despite posing no threat to vessels or aircraft, the test has nevertheless drawn the ire of Tokyo.
北朝鮮による核・ミサイル開発は我が国及び国際社会の平和と安全を脅かすものであり、断じて容認はできません。
The missile test comes days after Pyongyang showed images of centrifuges that produce fuel for its nuclear bombs. Pictures of Kim Jong-un visiting a uranium enrichment facility were released last Friday, along with his message that North Korea should produce more weapons-grade material. AUKUS partners, US, UK and Australia say they are in talks with Japan, Canada and New Zealand on potential collaboration on defence technology projects. In a joint statement marking the third anniversary of the trilateral defence partnership, AUKUS leaders say that these countries could work together with the alliance on advanced capabilities under its so-called Pillar 2, which does not involve nuclear submarines. The Canadian Defence Minister said this month that his country was in talks with AUKUS about joining projects, but did not give any details. New Zealand's Foreign Minister said that Wellington is consulting with the alliance on what engaging in AUKUS will mean for his country in strategic and economic terms. Well, the US, UK and Australia are working together to, quote, promote a free and open Indo-Pacific that's secure and stable. To that end, the alliance will see Canberra acquiring nuclear-powered submarines in the next 10 years, and the US, UK basing their own nuclear-powered submarines in Australia. Japan has expressed concern after a Chinese aircraft carrier sailed between two Japanese islands near Taiwan today. But Beijing insists the passage is lawful.
关于你提到的有关问题，建议向中方的主管部门去询问了解。 我在这里要强调指出的是，中方的有关活动符合中国的国内法和国际法。
Japan's defense ministry says this is the first time a Chinese Navy vessel sailed between Yonaguni and Iriomote Islands. The Liaoning carrier was also accompanied by 2 destroyers.
我が国及びこの地域の安全保障環境の観点から今般の事案は全く受け入れられないものであり、中国側に対し外交ルートを通じて我が国として深刻な懸念を表明したところであります。
Japan released these images showing the Chinese vessels in its waters. Just last month, Tokyo lodged a protest with China when one of its naval survey vessels entered Japanese waters shortly after an airspace breach. The uptick in Chinese military activity has spurred Japan to ramp up its defense spending. Well, China, on the other hand, is also bristling at the presence of foreign vessels and aircraft along the Taiwan Strait, which it considers to be part of its territory. The People's Liberation Army has released rare footage showcasing its tracking of foreign vessels. Just yesterday, a U.S. Navy aircraft flew through the strait in what it calls a show of commitment to an open international airspace. Coming up on East Asia tonight, as concerns mount over China's economy, Ray Dalio, founder of the world's largest hedge fund, weighs in on what the country can do to revive growth. It appears that many like it hot. Their instant noodles, that is. South Korea's exports of the staple exceed $800 million. Well, we'll tell you which country has the biggest appetite next. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, you are here to talk about a twist in Nippon Steel's near $15 billion takeover bid for U.S. Steel. Tell us more.
There is indeed a twist. Reports have emerged that Washington is extending its security review of the deal. Reports lifting shares of Nippon Steel, they closed nearly 2% higher in Tokyo today. Now, the deal has become a flashpoint in the U.S. race to the White House. An extension would allow the Japanese steelmaker to refile its submission to a security review panel. And this would restart the clock, pushing back the decision on the politically contentious plan until after the U.S. elections in November. Takeover has become an election flashpoint, particularly in the swing state, Pennsylvania. Now, this is where both the company and unionized workers are based. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have publicly opposed the deal. A Japanese electronics and home appliance maker Sharp is wading into the electric car market to offset declines in its key business. It's unveiled a prototype of its first electric car, which uses batteries and wheels by its Taiwanese parent, Foxconn. Now, to stand out from the crowded EV field, the car can be an extension of a home. Named the LDK Plus, the prototype is a van-type model and has a wider space at the rear end of which replicates a living room. Sharp says the prototype was designed to cater to those who have trouble finding personal space at home for work or study. And the move comes as the electronics manufacturer is looking to expand into new business fields after reporting declines in its traditional markets. The firm says it aims to enter the EV market in a few years. Sharp has logged a new loss over the past 2 years due to a slump in its mainstay LCD panel business. The growing popularity of South Korean culture and food is boosting exports of instant noodles, or ramyeon, as it's known in Korean. South Korea saw a surge in exports of instant noodles the first 8 months of the year. Outbound shipments for the January to August period estimated to have hit $800 million. That's a 32% hike from the same period last year. By country, exports to China grew close to 27% on year to $60 million, while shipments to the U.S. jumped about 61% to $140 million. Shipments to Britain logging in 65% rise on year. The spike has been fueled by the growing popularity of Korean TV shows and movies which feature the popular Korean food. A high demand for affordable, ready-to-eat food products amid high inflation also adding to ramyeon's popularity. Ramen exports globally are expected to hit $1 billion this year, and that's up from $952 million last year. Major corporations, including Nung Sim as well as Samyang Foods, say that they will work to further expand their foothold in the overseas market, particularly in the US and Europe in the fourth quarter. Nung Sim is planning to establish a sales unit in Europe early next year, while Samyang is constructing a new manufacturing plant outside of Seoul for exports. Stock market action now. The Nikkei 225 added 0.5% thanks to a recovery in chip-related counters and automakers. The yen, though, is strengthening against the greenback, up by 0.52%, 141.66 to the dollar. And that's because traders are betting that the Bank of Japan, which sets policy on Friday, will turn dovish on rates, round about the same time as the Fed prepares to cut. Markets in South Korea closed for a holiday. And Chinese stocks rebounded, returning from an extended break since Friday, playing catch-up to reaction from the weak data out over the weekend. Shanghai Composite gaining 0.5% thanks to gains in property and financial shares, and it's above that key 2,700 level. The smaller Shenzhen component adding 0.1%. And markets in Hong Kong closed for a holiday as well. On the topic of China's weak economic data, now I caught up with Ray Dalio, founder of Bridgewater Associates, on the sidelines of the Milken Institute's Asia Summit. Now, he believes restructuring China's local government debt remains crucial for the country's economic revival.
I think that China right now is at a juncture. And if I take the economic, the real problem is that the real estate debt problem and the local government debt problem has not been dealt with adequately yet. There needs to be a restructuring of the debt. So if we look at China, let's take the various sectors within China. The household sector, 70% of their savings is in real estate. That real estate's gone down. Stocks have gone down. Incomes are threatened. And so they're holding money in cash. And so that's a problem. As far as government spending, which a lot of the economy is dependent on, about 83% of government spending is local government spending. And those local governments have gotten their money from selling land and also borrowing money. They can't now make land sales, and they also, the borrowing is not going to work, and those who they borrowed from are going to continue to have problems. It's been let go too long, and there needs to be a restructuring and a change in monetary policy. So from an economic point of view, I think we're at an inflection point. If that is not dealt with sooner, then there's the risk of something like a Japanese situation economically for that period. So I think that that's what it looks like domestically. Internationally, again, I think the issue of taking manufacturing, going to the third world and using technologies, the chips in the third world will be part of the plan. And I think that probably they'll continue to remain competitive in that. So those are the issues that have to be dealt with, I think.
So, Ray, if you had the ears of the Chinese policymakers, how would you be advising them to handle the economy then?
Now, just what I've said. It's the difficult process of restructuring debt. And it's a very difficult process, and particularly at a politically sensitive time, because when you restructure debt, you're restructuring value. When you're losing, when you write down some of the debt, you are writing down some entity's assets. And so you have to, that challenging exercise of restructuring the debt and then also having a monetary policy that is conducive to not holding money in cash. There's a pushing on a string phenomenon in this part of the cycle. And so right now, when you have deflation and you have an interest rate that is above the inflation rate, and that is it's the highest returning asset, and it's the safest asset. You have to chase it out with a monetary policy in which interest rates are below the inflation rate, that the nominal bond yield is below the nominal growth rate. Otherwise, the debt continues to compound and become a problem. And you have to have a positive slope yield curve. And with that, you'll probably have to have some currency weakness, sort of the way the Japanese have dealt with their debt problem.
I'd like to talk about the investment environment. I mean, falling interest rates means a potentially new investment environment. How should investors be adjusting their portfolio allocation?
I think the greatest challenge of investors is now how to diversify well, because if you look at the returns of asset classes and so on, so much is concentrated in how the U.S. market, and particularly the tech sector of the U.S. market, a limited number of companies have performed well. So when you're looking at that, there's an equity, everybody's long, and there's a long bias, and it's concentrated in those limited number of companies, which, by the way, reflects a limited number of people and a limited, and the whole issue of the wealth gap issues. But anyway, so when you're thinking about that, you have to think about how to diversify well. That's a whole other subject. But I think that some issues like to think about maybe inflation index bonds rather than normal bonds. I think there's some gold in the portfolio serves to diversify the portfolio so that if those other assets don't perform well, there's better levels of diversification, and also where you invest. Right now, I would say internationally, I would say the three things that I look at is a country, just like individuals or companies, what's their income statement and balance sheet like? Do they earn more than they spend? And do they have more assets than liabilities? That's going to be important in this time. What is their internal effectiveness? Do they have internal order or internal disorder? How effective are they being productive? And number three is, are they in the risk of an international conflict? I think that the neutral, productive countries, so if I was to look at that, I would say, as you look to ASEAN countries in this region, some of those, and India and so on, those are the countries that are neutral in this, and also they're at the point where they're at their takeoff point, they have enough capital to invest and become more productive. So diversification into those kinds of assets it should be a part of the people's portfolios, I believe.
And that'll do it for the business segment.
Well, that's a great discussion, Ray Dalio. Thanks so very much for bringing us that interview. Roland Lim there from the business desk. Now, Huawei's hotly anticipated smartphone, the Mate XT, hasn't even hit the shelves yet, but it's already being sold by some online resellers for more than double its listing price of $2,800. Well, the phone officially goes on sale later this week. And due to its limited availability and high demand, resellers have begun listing the upcoming phone on their websites at a profit. The practice is commonly called flipping. Well, these prices are usually greatly inflated, with some of the phones going for as much as $7,000. Huawei has called its new phone trifold, meaning that it can fold and unfold at several seams to expand the screen. It also boasts brand new AI functionality. The phone is Huawei's attempt to compete with Apple, which had revealed the iPhone 16 just hours before the Mate XL. All right, time now for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, the lengths Taiwanese students will go to in order to fight the cost of living. Would you eat food nearing expiry just for the discounts? We discussed when we return. You're watching East Asia Tonight. The Taiwanese company, whose pages were detonated in Lebanon, denies involvement in the act, saying the devices were manufactured elsewhere under a license. AUKUS partners, US, UK and Australia, say that they are in talks with Japan, Canada and New Zealand on potential collaboration on defense technology projects. And North Korea test launches its new 600mm multiple launch rocket system. Japan and South Korea condemn the move as provocations. It looks like more young Taiwanese are turning to near-expired food items sold at steep discounts as a way to cope with the island's soaring cost of living. Well, it's become a popular topic on social media, with netizens sharing tips and experience of buying these discounted goods. Well, CNA's Victoria Jen has more.
Bill Lin works as a substitute teacher at a high school in New Taipei City. Like many young Taiwanese, navigating the soaring cost of living has become a daily struggle for the 30-year-old.
那因为我是有印象，以前就是大学时期，大概我一个月花费就是大概是到4000块。对，那现在的话就是可能那个吃饭费用就已经到了就是7000多，所以会觉得那个费用上已经增加了1倍。
It's about 4 p.m. Bill has just finished work. He is making a regular stop at this convenience store, where he visits 5 times a week to buy his dinner. He's in time to pick up some bargains. Every day across 3 periods, the store puts near expiry food items on sale with steep discounts. They have become very popular with young Taiwanese seeking to cope with the rising cost of living.
主要是像以前就是便利商店的饭团，就是大概都是25块、20块。现在则是发现到就是饭团的价钱已经可以就是高到就是50-60块。对，这会又觉得说，这样子一颗饭团，然后相比于以前，可是可以买一个便当的价钱。
On social media, netizens had a tongue-in-cheek name for these promotion periods, calling them 乞丐时光 or beggar hour.
其实我觉得这样子的讲法，听到还是会有点不太高兴哦，因为这其实是一种就是在让食品可以有更好的去消费或者是被吃掉的机会。对，因为毕竟食物上就是被浪费掉，其实也是蛮可惜的。然后加上也是一种，我们这些消费者看到之后，觉得有一种算是一种小确幸的感觉。可能看到有折扣的商品，然后稍微估算一下，觉得这个价钱就是好像有感觉回到就是以前的物价的感觉，所以就会更有意愿去购买。
所以呢，其实像我们之前只有2个时段的一个折扣，那我们在去年呢也增加了一个8折的一个时段。那我们也是观察到消费者的需求的增加，那消费者可以自己订阅自己喜欢的门市，然后看看自己喜欢的这些商品有没有折扣出现。那也因为这样子方便的一个做法呢，其实包括很多上班族啦、小资族啦，或者是学生族群都非常喜欢使用我们这个系统。
Buying these discounted items allows Bill to cap his food expenses at just about $7 a day.
其实节省的话，估算下来其实可以节省到就是700到1000左右，也算是蛮多的哦。因为折扣如果这样看下来的话，就是省下来的1000块也可以让自己在1个月可以去吃一次好料这样子。也慢慢的会开始倾向于就是说可能去找一些就是真的比较不会去变动价钱的那些店。
Bill works as a part-time tuition teacher on his off days. His income fluctuates. On average, he takes home about $1,500 a month. With that money, he has to support his mother, pay rent, and other expenses. He saves about 1/5 of his income every month. His dream is to eventually own a place of his own.
我觉得目前的收入来讲，就是存下来的钱，其实买房那些可能性还不大。我也期望说，就是在这5到10年之内，我的工作可以在就是提高更高的那个水平。那我在这段期间，我也会开始就是希望说能够尽量先存到一笔就是可以买房的头期款。
Taiwan is one of the least affordable housing markets in the world.
以现在的状况，其实要买到房子，可能如果维持这个状况不变的话，那应该也要20-30年以上的时间。对，我会认为一定会花很久的时间这样子。
And for more, let's bring in CNA's Victoria Jen in Taipei. Well, Vic, first up, I would just like to say, I mean, I'm totally okay eating food that's, near expiry date. But the fact that they spend, or the bill there spends just $7 a day on food to get by, I mean, firstly, that's quite an impressive feat. But I'm wondering, is this common among young people in Taiwan, or is it just an isolated case in Bill's situation?
Well, the way the Bill plans his daily expenses is based on his
personal situation. For example, he has a saving goal and he has to support his mother and pay rent. But what he shares in common with other young Taiwanese are stagnant wages and high living expenses. You hear the story that he said his food expenses have doubled in the past few years. Official data shows that Taiwan's consumer price index increased 10% in the past 10 years. And among which food prices increased 26%. But salary, on the other hand, is not moving up as quickly. Official data shows that Taiwanese under the age of 30 earned about $1,300 a month. Compared to South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore, people in the same age group that make about 3 times more. So that has prompted many young Taiwanese to want to work overseas for higher pay. And a recent survey shows that 50% of young Taiwanese want to work overseas. And this could further exacerbate Taiwan's talent shortage.
Yeah, under 30s, the average earning $1,300 a month. Wow. So this stagnant wage growth, though, right? I mean, Vic, it has been an issue in Taiwan for decades now. Why is the problem still unsolved after all these years?
That's right. Taiwan's wages have remained stagnant for the past 3 decades, and they are due to a number of reasons. It goes back to 1990s when a lot of Taiwanese factories moved to China for cheaper land and labor. That has caused a lot of job opportunities in Taiwan. At the same time, Taiwan's exports were competing against cheaper goods made in China. So that has prompted Taiwanese companies to cut costs, including wages. On top of that, Taiwan's education system is designed to train young Taiwanese general knowledge rather than specific skills. So that has discouraged employers to pay more for skilled jobs. And not to mention that Taiwan's service industry accounts for more than 60% of the total employment. And service industry has a low threshold. So that is also led to a low wages among young Taiwanese.
And it seems like it's a tough time to be a young person in Taiwan, not to mention that, everybody wants to own a home, like what Bill said. And it seems like, trying to have a house, in your name, it's particularly tough for this generation. Is that right?
That's right. Taiwan's property price to income ratio has exceeded 10 times last year. That's a historic high. And basically what that means is a family would have to spend zero money for at least 10 years in order for them to save enough money to buy a home. And so in the situation, it's actually worse in Taipei, which is 15 times. Now, there's a number of reasons why Taiwan has such high property price. Because first of all, it's because of limited supply. Now, Taiwan is a small island with a population of 23 million people. And secondly, is the mortgage rate. It has one of the world's lowest low mortgage rate. And that's because many Taiwanese like to save. So banks are forced to lower interest rate in order to attract lenders. And finally is the low taxes. Taiwan's properties are taxed not by their actual market value, but rather at only 10% of their market value. And so that encourages speculation. And that has prompted the government to launch a series of measures to stifle the speculation. And one of which is to a maximum penalty of $1.5 million US.
Wow. I suppose a bit of relief, unless you've got parents leaving a house for you behind, perhaps more of a relief for the younger generation in that case. Well, thanks so very much, Victoria Jen, speaking to us live from Taipei. Time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir has started voting to elect members to the territory's legislature. We take a look at the issues when we return. And scientists discover Van Gogh's brushstrokes in the starry night. They aren't random at all. Details in just a bit. Voters in the Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir region have started voting in the first phase of local elections. Well, they've been voting in members to the state's legislature in what's the first local election in the region in a decade. It's also the first election since India's only Muslim-majority province was stripped of its autonomy and special rights back in 2019. Kashmir is governed by both India and Pakistan in parts, but claimed by both in full. Well, CNA's Ishan Gogh tells us about the mood on the ground from Indian-administered Kashmir.
This is the first regional election for the people of Jammu and Kashmir in 10 years. And people here are now seeing this as an opportunity to make their voices heard, to protest against the federal government's decision to remove this region's special powers in 2019. The revocation of this region's special status and its status as a full state was done overnight without consulting the people of Kashmir, and that's what people here are still calling a big betrayal by the federal government. Some voters say they will use the ballot to demand Kashmir's statehood be restored.
ये हमारे डेवलपमेंट के लिए नहीं है, बल्कि एक साइकोलॉजिकल जो वार हमारे अंदर चल रहा है कि जब अगर हम स्टेटहुड वापस मिलेगा तो यकीनी पे थोड़ी सी राहत मिलेगी कश्मीरी के लोगों में, तो उनको थोड़ा लगेगा कि कुछ मिला है. सो मेरे ख्याल से कि ये मेरी ख्याल है नहीं, हमारे जो यहाँ के यूथ है उनका भी यही पर्टिकुलर ख्याल है कि एक स्टेटहुड मिलना चाहिए ताकि हम कश्मीरी जो थोड़ा सा सेटिस्फाई हो जाए.
स्टेट वापस आना चाहिए, हम उसमें खुश है कि यहाँ गुर्बत आया, गरीबी हो गया, यहाँ स्टेट वापस आना चाहिए, हम उसी में खुश है. गवर्नमेंट बनेगा, हमारा राहत मिलेगा.
It is why political parties have focused on this issue as well. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party, the BJP, has fielded Rafiq Wani from the politically crucial constituency of Anantnag West. He's going door to door to convince voters that the federal government's decision to strip the state of its autonomy helped cut off funding for separatists and terrorists in the region who for decades protested Indian rule through an armed insurgency. In one of the most militarized regions in the world, it's very common to see candidates flanked by both the state as well as federal police. They're all equipped in tactical gear and assault rifles. It's a sign of how real the threat of militant attacks still is, despite the government claiming that things have improved vastly in the past 5 years when the region of Kashmir was brought under New Delhi's direct control. One of the BJP's rivals in the Kashmir Valley is the People's Democratic Party, or the PDP, a party Modi's BJP had allied with to form the last government of Kashmir in 2014. Candidate Mirza Mahmood Beg is meeting voters one-on-one. He says people of Kashmir respond better to a personal touch. Beg says Kashmir's elections are unique and not in a good way.
आप किसी जगह का नाम बता सकते हैं देश में जहां सुप्रीम कोर्ट को इंटरवीन करना पड़े कि इन बेचारों को अपना फंडामेंटल बेसिक राइट, डेमोक्रेटिक राइट बैलेट का दे दो? इसलिए ये डिफरेंट है. ये क्या ठीक है? सिक्योरिटी प्रेजेंस आपने कहा, ये मेरे ख्याल में आप प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी जी से पूछ लीजिए, होम मिनिस्टर अमित शाह साहब से पूछ लीजिए, वो तो कहते हैं हमने सब कुछ ठीक कर दिया. अगर सब कुछ ठीक है तो बाकी हिस्सों की तरह क्यों यहाँ इतनी सिक्योरिटी प्रेजेंस?
Gatherings here are smaller than what you'll see in other parts of India, need multiple rounds of permissions from security forces, and often take place in heavily fortified areas. Officials in Kashmir say the security blanket here is crucial to curb separatists who fueled unrest for decades and continue to be active in pockets, and to counter terrorists who New Delhi claims Pakistan supports and funds. Islamabad has denied these allegations. While many voters say they feel overwhelmed by the security presence, they also want to use their vote to demand a fix for other issues in this election. Rising unemployment, a crumbling, underfunded healthcare infrastructure, and constant security threats that make it hard to do business here. The region has historically seen very low voter turnout. But the recently concluded general elections saw a massive uptick, with half the people in the Kashmir Valley voting, as compared to 2019, when only a fifth of the voters cast their ballot. Analysts say that this time around, Kashmir is seeing bigger rallies and people are generally more enthusiastic about participating in these elections. And candidates are hoping that this momentum will also reflect in the voter turnout. Ishan Garg, CNA, Anantnag, Kashmir.
Heat waves and rising sea levels are the top concerns among Singapore residents when it comes to the impact of climate change. Well, that's according to a study by IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. Arnold Gay with the story.
Close to 3,000 respondents from the 10 ASEAN countries responded in this survey. More than 8 in 10 Singapore residents viewed heat waves as the most serious climate change impact the country is facing. And about 7 in 10 were concerned about rising sea levels as well as flooding. More than 6 in 10 Singapore respondents felt the government has been the most active in tackling climate change in the country. Meantime, less than 5% felt that businesses were most active in this area. Researchers say this is a clear signal to industries to do better when it comes to climate action. When it comes to food, more than 4 in 10 Singapore respondents said they do not experience food insecurity.
Kiribati is a picturesque Pacific island nation struggling to survive. It's one of the lowest lying countries in the world, and climate change is threatening its very existence. Time is running out, and one option is to move the country's entire population to a plot of land in neighbouring Fiji. Well, in this week's episode of the CNA Correspondent podcast, Teresa Tang sits down with Jack Board to talk about the country's plight.
When you boarded your flight, you saw these islands from the window of your plane as you left. What went through your mind? What resonated the most deeply with you?
Look, there's no ending to climate change, right? And I was pretty sad, actually, to leave Kiribati. Not that I wanted to stay, because it was a really challenging experience to be there and to kind of see the challenges that exist for people. The situation really felt quite hopeless. The odds are stacked against the people of Kiribati. And when you visit these impacted communities, not just in the Pacific, but all over, we like to say, like, the local people have so much strength, they have so much resilience. And it's true, like, their community there is really strong and people are proud of where they come from. They're proud to be called Kiribati. My deep fear is that strength and resilience is not enough. It's also an excuse that we like to put onto marginalised groups. These threads are being undermined by the climate challenges now that exist, the challenges that lie ahead for them.
And you can catch the rest of that episode and other behind-the-scenes conversations with our global team of reporters on our podcast, CNA Correspondent, available on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. A Japanese period drama series, Shogun, took home a record 18 Emmy Awards this week. But the cast members are not the only ones basking in its success. A workshop in central Tokyo that teaches people how to swing a Japanese sword is also getting a boost.
2, 3.
Tourists are flocking to Japan to seek out an authentic samurai experience. Samurai Theatre Tokyo credits the drama series Shogun for breathing new life into the ancient practice, which owner Kazuko Mitsui says has helped increase their customers by 150 to 200% since last year. Dominic Lenoble travelled from the Netherlands to use a real Japanese blade, or katana, just like she's seen in Shogun.
The show is really well done. The acting is really natural, and I especially like the fact that it's in full Japanese.
Shogun won 18 Emmy Awards on Monday, the most ever for a single drama series, according to the Emmys website. The historical drama set in Imperial Japan has garnered attention for featuring a majority Japanese cast, with Japanese being the primary language spoken within the series. Sword fighting teacher Gensei Kamide is a fan.
っていうのを、要は元々のところを世界中の人が知る機会になるっていうのは嬉しいですよね。
Now some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. A commander nominee for U.S. Forces Korea says that Pyongyang's nuclear and missile capabilities make up the single greatest challenge the group faces and vows to maintain a constant state of readiness if he's confirmed. That's according to Yonhap News Agency. Now, Kyodo News says that Chinese authorities have detained a man after he stabbed a Japanese school student in the southern city of Shenzhen. The primary student is hospitalized and his condition is stable. The Japanese embassy in Beijing issued an alert following the attack, urging caution against suspicious people. And then Asahi Shimbun reports that a survey it conducted shows that the upcoming ruling Liberal Democratic Party's presidential election will likely be decided in a runoff, with none of the 9 candidates expected to win the majority in the first round of voting. Now, a look at how science can be accurately depicted in art. A study by Chinese and French scientists have found that the swirling patterns around the stars and the moon seen in a painting titled The Starry Night by Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh aligns with long-established scientific theories, such as the prediction of how the Earth's atmosphere flows and scales. Well, experts determined their findings through precise analysis of the painting. Well, they measured the scale and spacing of the brush strokes and also used the brightness of the paint colors as a way to indicate the physical moment found in the atmosphere. Well, researchers say that Van Gogh appears to possess a deep and intuitive understanding of natural phenomena, and the findings may have implications beyond the appreciation of art itself. And staying with celestial bodies, sky watchers from parts of the world savor a rare astronomical treat, with a supermoon delighting observers, as it coincided with a partial lunar eclipse. Overnight, from Tuesday into Wednesday, the partial lunar eclipse was visible across the globe, although the UK and the US had the clearest sightings. Supermoons happen when the moon is at its closest point to Earth in its orbit. And this month's full moon is the second of 4 supermoons this year. The next partial eclipse will be in August of 2026. And that does it for Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia. And of course, you can always find us on Facebook, YouTube, and on X. Well, thanks for your company this evening.